Louisville's Quincy Riley is going to be one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC this upcoming season. We will explain why as we continue in ranking our top 15 Louisville football players ahead of next season on today's episode of the show. With that being said, let's get right on into it.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinals Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the show is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. In this third installment of the top 15 Louisville football player rankings, we are diving into the 7 through 9 rankings. We will discuss why Quincy Riley will be one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC. We'll explain why this is Jack Plummer's time to shine and how everything is in place for him to have an exciting season. And then to conclude the show, we will talk about why Stephen Herron is key to the Louisville pass rush and the defense as a whole. So, as I mentioned, if you haven't paid attention to the previous two shows that covered 15 through 13 and 12 through 10 respectively, you can go check those out on whatever streaming service you utilize. But if you haven't listened to those, a couple things to note. The format is a little different due to algorithm purposes and header purposes. We will be beginning with the highest rankings, so we'll go from 7 to 9. I know it's not necessarily orthodox in any sense, but that's the way we're going to do it. And to get a glimpse of how these rankings came to be and how I took everything into consideration, I essentially looked at overall talent, what the projected production was going to look like, and then the overall impact that that player was going to have on his position and his team as a whole. So beginning with number 7, that is Quincy Riley. Riley transferred in from Middle Tennessee State before the beginning of last season, where at Middle Tennessee State in 2021, he was one of the best ball hawks in the country. He had 9 pass deflections, 5 interceptions, also a pick 6. He had 1.5 sacks to go along with 33 total tackles. It took some time for the 6-foot native of Columbia, South Carolina, to see significant playing time this past season, and it was probably to be expected. You had guys like Kittrell Clark back. You had Chandler Jones. You also had Jarvis Brownlee enter the mix as well. So there was sort of a logjam for snaps at the cornerback position. But one thing that we talk about when we discuss MJ Griffin is when the defense took that turn towards the middle of the season, when they went from sort of pedestrian to pretty solid, a couple changes were made. Obviously, scheme changes. Brian Brown and company dialed up more pass rushes, but you saw players like MJ Griffin and Quincy Riley begin to play more. And when they played more, I don't think it was a secret as to why the Louisville defense continually improved towards the end of the season, got better each and every week, specifically the secondary. But overall, I think that when you enter Quincy Riley into the mix this past season for Louisville, good things happened. I mean, he had 27 total tackles, had 1 sack, had 3 interceptions along with a pick 6 as well, 2 pass deflections, but most of his production came towards the end of the season. He had a season high 4 tackles in back-to-back games against Virginia and Pittsburgh. He had that pretty solid game against Wake Forest as well, to where he had 2 interceptions, turned that into 101 yards and a touchdown. So overall, very, very solid performance there. He had the interception against NC State and continued to play good up through the season finale against Kentucky and Cincinnati in the bowl game. So I think that the talent is obviously there. It was just a matter of getting him onto the field, and ultimately it got to a point where Louisville needed some answers in the secondary. The secondary was getting burned. Guys were getting beat on the deep ball, and enter Quincy Riley into the mix. And I think that some of those problems definitely got alleviated, at least a little bit at the very least. But ultimately, I think that there was some significant improvement, but the talent is there. He's been a guy for the past couple seasons that has been really good at reading the quarterback's eyes and essentially just being a ball hawk in the back half of that defense and just being able to sniff out opposing reads and jumping the passing routes. He does a good job of, even though he's only 6 foot, being able to contend with taller receivers. I think that the talent is there. That's why he's sort of borderline top 5. And really, when you look at the top 5 for me, I think that 5 to 9, like splitting hairs. And we talked about 15 to 10. It was sort of the same thing, right? That you're almost flipping a coin and you can make a rationale and justify a player being ranked in said position. But I think that Quincy Riley is number 7 for me because I think that he is going to be one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC. And what I mean by that, how he's going to get there is, number one, he's going to get more playing time off the bat. Yes, you do enter Storm Duck into the conversation. However, I don't think you're going to see a drop in production because there is more emphasis on the versatility of the defensive backs room, the new 4-2-5 base defensive package. I think you're going to see Quincy Riley not only play on the boundary, but also in the slot as well. And honestly, I could see him starting out immediately, starting in the slot and defending receivers in those packages while also rotating to the outside. The versatility that he possesses is something that I think is going to bode well with, players like Jarvis Brownlee, who are very good at defending the run. And then you have Storm Duck, who isn't as good of a man in coverage as Riley, but he's a better run defender. So you have guys that sort of play off of each other's strengths. I think that Riley's going to see the field right away. He's going to be a player that is going to play a ton, the majority of the snaps. So the production opportunities are going to be there. We talked about the talent being there as well, and now you talk about the impact. I think that you can't overlook the notion of a guy just essentially being a lockdown cornerback, which I think that Quincy Riley has the potential to be. A parallel that I keep drawing over the offseason is Kittrell Clark transferring in from Liberty. Year one was pretty decent, respectable. And then year 2, he exploded onto the scene and was one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC before he got hurt against NC State. Now, you look at a guy like Quincy Riley, who also comes from a non-Power 5 school at that respective school, probably even more so than Kittrell Clark, comes to Louisville, has to play behind a couple players on the depth chart when his number is called. When he does get the opportunity, he makes the most of it. And I think that those parallels will continue over into this season when Riley gets those opportunities, because it was shown all throughout the season when he got the opportunity that good things happened when he was on the field. Good things happened when MJ Griffin was on the field. And credit to Brian Brown and company for making those adjustments and getting those players on the field. But I think that Riley has the overall talent. He's going to have the production opportunities that he's going to be able to cash in on. It is my prediction that he's going to lead the team in interceptions and ultimately one of the best coverage cornerbacks in the ACC, both in the slot and potentially out wide as well. The thing keeping him only at number 7 in this list is really, like I said, it's not much. It's a flip of a coin. I think that I think you're splitting hairs when you get from 5 to 7, and I think that this is more of a testament to the guys ahead of Quincy Riley on the list, more so than any knock on his game and indication that he's not as good as these players. I think that the production is going to be just a little bit more significant for the two ahead of Riley on this list that we will discuss on the next rankings episode. But nonetheless, this number 7 ranking is no slight to him whatsoever. He is the best defensive back at cornerback for the Louisville Cardinals. I do think that he's going to be one of the best cornerbacks in the ACC, and he will be a part of a very, very promising trio with guys like Jarvis Brownlee and Storm Duck, who we talked about in the most recent episode. So a lot to be excited about for Quincy Riley this upcoming season. Before we talk about number 8 on the list, Jack Plummer, we're going to talk about an exciting opportunity that you need to take advantage of in the sports world. That is with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the MLB. The league is post-All-Star break. Shohei Ohtani is on fire. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel. You can get up to 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets, up to $200. Bet 20, you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. One of the main bets that I like is who's going to hit the first home run. And unfortunately, I've been going with Shohei Ohtani, but maybe I need to switch it up because it seems like he's more of a guy that shows up in the clutch rather than getting that early home run. Adley Rutschman is a guy that I would focus on as he bats in the top 3 of the Baltimore Orioles lineup. He's a player to focus on. Wander Franco in the heart of the order for Tampa Bay. He's another guy with a ton of pop off the bat that I could look at him to being a player that could hit a home run very quickly. But there's a handful of other players. That's why it makes it so interesting. There's so many different specific bets that you can go with. It's on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Once again, FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Continuing on along in the second segment of this third installment of the top 15 player rankings. Number 8 is California quarterback transfer Jack Plummer. Over the course of the offseason, we have explained over and over how the cards are in the favor for Plummer to do damage this upcoming season. Everything is intact. The stars are aligned for him on multiple fronts to have a successful season. Number 8 for me, because I think that, overall, this is a very talented roster, and this is no indication of me thinking that there's some lack of talent, because in all honesty, number 8 is still a pretty solid ranking for me. It is me saying that he is extremely talented. He's going to have a great season, or the possibility of having a great season. And obviously the implication is huge. You can make the argument that quarterback is number 1 regardless, because of the impact that a quarterback has on a certain team. I just view that as kind of lazy. I don't, discredit anyone who says that, but when you look at the 3 categories, production, impact, those are there. And that's where I could see Plummer being higher on this list. But overall talent level, I think that the players ahead of Plummer are more talented at their positions than Plummer is at his. And that's no disrespect to him. That is more so praise for the guys ahead of him. And really just a matter of that and nothing else. It is not suggesting that he's not good enough. Plummer, according to a lot of national analysts, people who cover the ACC, most people view him as a guy anywhere from 5 to maybe 10, as low as I've seen him. I think he has the potential to be a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. Right now, I have him right in the 5 or 6 range. Like I said, there's a lot of opportunity there for him. Obviously, the possible impact if he has a great season, the ceiling is through the roof for the Louisville Cardinals because of the position that he plays, but also the possible production that he had. He had a career season this past year for California. The 6'5" native of Gilbert, Arizona, spent first 3 years at Purdue, had a solid first year in 2019, 1,600 yards, 11 touchdowns to 8 interceptions when you consider that he was a freshman. Struggled with injury after that season, lost the starting job to Aiden O'Connell and never got it back, decided to transfer and turned in a career season for the Golden Bears. Had 3,095 yards, 21 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. and completed 62.5% of his passes. I want to read a tweet from David Hale of ESPN.com, who is one of the more prominent reporters for the ACC across all of the national landscape. This is a tweet that he sent that I thought was very, very interesting. He says, and I quote, "Here is the full list of Power 5 quarterbacks to throw for 3,000 yards, 20-plus touchdowns, and less than 10 interceptions for a team that won 4 or fewer games in the playoff era. Jack Plummer in 2022 for Cal." His last couple sentences is, "That's it. That's the whole list." And I think that goes to show you that Plummer really struggled, or let me rephrase that, Plummer's team struggling did not hamper his production. It didn't hinder what he was able to do. The reality of the situation is he didn't have that great of an offensive line. The skill positions around him struggled here and there, tough defense, but Plummer nonetheless had some pretty solid performances, showed a lot of poise against some top teams. I mean, you look at what he did against UCLA in the last game of the season. 24 for 34, 294 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns and over 400 yards against USC back on November 5th. Had 3 touchdowns and 245 yards, no interceptions against Washington in late October. Now, granted, the Pac-12 is not some defensive powerhouse conference, and I'm not saying that it is, but he did that against respectable competition. It's not like he did that against, buy-in games that, he was able to inflate his stats. He was pretty consistent throughout the season, and that leads me to believe that the cards are in place. The stars are aligned for Jack Plummer to have a fantastic season. Number one, the offensive line is probably the best that he will have had in his collegiate career. You go out and you get a guy like Eric Miller, who started for Purdue all 14 games last season. Brian Hudson, who is on this rankings list higher up. He's one of the best centers, not only in the ACC, but the country as well. You have Michael Gonzalez, who has pro potential, potentially moving to the interior, but has a ton of versatility. Plethora of veteran guys who transferred in, like John Paul Flores, Willie Tyler, Vincent Lumia, and then Renato Brown is returning as well. Some depth pieces to go along with that. You have the offensive line. You probably have the best skill positions that you've had during your time in college. You have Jamari Thrash, the best receiver in the Sun Belt this past season. Kevin Coleman Jr., a former top 100 recruit that had 500 receiving yards last year. Amari Huggins-Bruce, that has a ton of home run threat ability. Jimmy Callaway, Jaden Thompson, 2 Power 5 transfers, and then a couple of highly rated high school guys, William Faust, Kataris Hicks, and Jaleel McClain. And then not to mention, you have a solid running back core, Jawar Jordan, Isaac Garendo, and Maurice Turner filling out that 3-headed monster. And nonetheless, the main thing is the system familiarity. I don't expect Plummer to miss a beat. This is a system that Plummer knows. He's played in before, and you're playing for one of the best offensive coaches in the nation in Jeff Brom and Brian Brom. That's something to focus on. So I don't necessarily think there's going to be a ton of a learning curve for Jack Plummer. Brom has essentially said that he's been unable to stump Plummer at any point this offseason. Everything that he's throwing at him, he's being able to internalize and being able to then teach his guys. He's essentially like a second coach on the field, which is awesome when you talk about your quarterback. So having that veteran presence, the talents there, I think that he is a guy that's going to have career numbers. You can make the case that he is higher than number 8 simply due to importance of the position alone. However, it was like splitting hairs for, anywhere from 3 on down to 8, in my opinion, on down to 9. And this is no disrespect to Plummer. He is definitely top 10, number 8, in my opinion. You could convince me that he is potentially higher than that. But for the remainder of the show, we will discuss another player in the top 10, number 9. That is former Trinity High School standout, Stanford edge rusher, Stephen Herron. Excuse me. And we will discuss why he is going to be key to the Louisville pass rush, why he makes this list here momentarily. Before we do that, I want to thank you all once again, as I always do at this time, for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Pretty interesting. We have a couple of special episodes in the works, a potential women's basketball assistant coach episode could be in the works, and then we will continue the rest of the week diving into the top 6 of the final top 15 player rankings. But nonetheless, final segment of the show, we're concluding with the number 9 ranking. That is hometown standout Stephen Herron. Went to Stanford for the past 4 seasons out of Trinity High School. I covered Herron in high school when I was with Louisville Catholic Sports. I covered Herron in his state championship season for the Trinity Shamrocks in 2019. He was the best defensive player on the team, arguably the best player on the team. I knew during that season that he was going to be a high Power 5 caliber player, and he simply turned in a solid career at Stanford. It took a couple seasons for him to see some significant opportunity. Year 1, he only had 2 tackles. The next 2 seasons, under 20 total tackles, 4 sacks combined. But in 2022, he was able to have a breakout season, 37 total tackles to go along with 5.5 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. The 6'4", 240-pound native of the city of Louisville decided to come home in the offseason. One of the things that we talked about Jeff Brom-wise when we discussed Brom being hired was his ability to keep guys home. One thing that I think we discredited was his potential to bring guys back home. And that was a very, very welcomed phenomenon. And I think that Herron, with his ability to get after the quarterback, solid rushing defender as well. Look, it's not going to be easy to replace Yasir Abdullah and Yaya Diaby, but I do think a player like Stephen Herron is talented enough to be able to step into that role and be able to be a solid pass rusher opposite of Ashton Gelati. I think that that's something that Louisville definitely needed to address, was replacing those two. And it's sort of like Moneyball. You probably can't do it, player for player, but you can do it in the aggregate. And I think that you're going to be able to, get production from Popeye Williams, now from TJ Capers, from Cam Wilson, but mainly Stephen Herron. I think he's a top 10 player because he's got that production at the Power 5 level for Stanford, which usually always has pretty solid defensive linemen. And I think that having that production, having a career year in 2022, it bodes well for this upcoming season because he brings that veteran leadership. That's something that Jeff Brom and Mark Ivey have hit on this spring, is that veteran leadership for the guys at the defensive line position. But not only that, is you have the talent, obviously, you have the proven production, and I think that goes hand in hand. That's going to land him on this list alone. But what puts him in the top 10 is, I think, the impact on this position. What he's going to be able to do opposite of Ashton Gelati, I think, really helps Louisville's pass rush out because you're replacing a lot. I mean, you're replacing, in my opinion, and in the opinions of a lot of people, the best defensive player in the ACC this past season. That's Yasir Abdullah. Not only that, Yaya Diaby, drafted in the 3rd round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think it's essentially almost impossible to replace them, swap for swap. But like I said, you can replace the statistical portion of it to an extent. Now, getting to those numbers is going to be tough, but adding a guy like Stephen Herron definitely gets you closer than just a regular addition. He is one of the best transfer portal additions for the Louisville Cardinals in the transfer portal window. That is saying a ton considering the transfer portal offseason that this program had. But nonetheless, I think that what holds him back in these rankings is because I think Ashton Gelati is the top pass rusher on this team. That's no disrespect to Herron. I do think that Herron is going to be a player that plays a significant role early, plays a significant role throughout the course of the season, has a great year. Will he be able to match what he was able to do statistically for Stanford in 2022? I think he can get to 40 total tackles because I think he's going to be utilized in the rushing department, and I think he's going to continue to grow. If he gives you over 5.5 sacks, this was a home run addition, and I think it's going to be just that. So Stephen Herron coming in at number 9 because of his, ability to affect the U of L pass rush, be the key in that group. Number 8, Jack Plummer. The stars are aligned for him to have his best season yet and help Louisville to reach new heights. Number 7 is cornerback Quincy Riley. He will be one of the best at the position in the Atlantic Coast Conference. That's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. To find all of the streaming services, you can pay attention to this graphic. But everyone, have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.